Daniel chapter 1 and 2, but because it's a familiar story to you, I will just read portions from chapter 1 and from chapter 2. So Daniel 1, 1 to 8. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, son of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylon, or Babylonia, and put it in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; and to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. And then from chapter 2, verses 19 to 23. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we ask of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
It's almost a cliche to say that we live in a post-Christian America. Even though many Christians may not know it, we have been taken captive by the secular culture, and our beliefs make increasingly little sense, and our language offensive to the world. And this was also true for Daniel and his friends, who were taken as exiles to Babylon. The world as they know it for hundreds of years has suddenly disappeared, and they became strangers in a strange land. But with God on their side, Daniel and his friends saved the day. The life of Daniel illustrates that God has a plan for the world and for the church, and that our future is in his hands. This gives us hope because we're living in a time of momentous transition. British evangelical social critic and keen observer of American culture, partly because he married an American wife that's trained at Oxford, describes those living in the West, including Europe and the United States today, as living in the twilight of 500 years of Western dominance of the world. And he warns that neither secular progress nor secular progressives with their totalitarian philosophy and illiberal liberalism have brought the West where they once promised. In fact, they are merely, and he's very critical, but very incisive. In fact, they are merely parasites on the Jewish and Christian beliefs and ideals that made the West the West. Besides, a cut-flower civilization lacks adequate root system. Now, several people have used different terms. Peter Berger, for example, a Christian, says, a universe without windows, or the universe without a soul. So we live in a cut-flower civilization. And Oskina says, there is a lack of adequate root system to nourish its own ideals, such as freedom, justice, equality, and universality. And that's why this is a Daniel moment for us. When Daniel and his friends were taken captive to Babylon, they were only 13 or 14. The passage that we read from 2 Timothy, Timothy was only about 16 years old. So this is a Daniel moment for those who profess Jesus as Lord. And in this passage, we see how God uses even a selfish and ambitious king Nebuchadnezzar to accomplish his will and purpose. We also see how Daniel and his friends refused to compromise their faith and their lifestyle. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was popular, wealthy, and respected. Yet he was unhappy because he was haunted by a dream that his personal well-being and the security of the kingdom will not last. Novelist David Foster Wallace, in his 2005 commencement address to Kenyon College graduates, says, "Worship money and things, you never feel you have enough. Worship power and you'll end up feeling weak and afraid. Worship your intellect and you'll end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out." So Nebuchadnezzar then made unreasonable demands on his magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, astrologers. I suppose these were the 4 different departments. Someone studied microbiology, but I don't know where that fits in these. Well, chemistry and all that may be more the astrology in those days. And they were summoned to interpret his dream. Otherwise, they would be cut to pieces. Now, Daniel heard about it through Arioch, the king's executioner, when he came to the door, and he prayed to God. And he urged his friends also to pray to God. So that night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision, and the lives of the wise man, along with Daniel and his friends, were spared. Now, if we said that Daniel's life illustrates how God works in the world, the church, and in our lives, what principles can we learn from the life of Daniel for us, living the post-Christian 21st century? In fact, just 2 years ago, Oxford Dictionary included a new word, post-truth. First, God will never give up on us or abandon us. A couple came in to see me when they found out that their son, who was studying at the time at the University of Iowa, was gay. And they just needed to talk to someone and to have reassurance that as his parents, they were okay. And that was way back in the early 70s when I first started campus ministry, when students at the University of Iowa, not UC Berkeley or UCLA, but University of Iowa organized the country's first gay liberation front. And then a little time after that, they organized the country's first lesbian liberation front, meeting weekly at our office building called Wesley House. So I was rubbing shoulders with them from time to time. In fact, I knew the co-founder of the Gay Liberation Front. Today, however, transgenderism has become the phase of sexual revolution, which started in 1930s by the anarchist Freudian scholar William Wright, and had untold influence on the 60s. So from the 30s, in fact, even before the 30s, the 20s, William Wright was already, as an anarchist, was already perpetuating sexual revolution. He coined the term. And this has influenced people like Norman Miller, for some of you who are a little older, and Hillary Clinton. And it's become the totalitarian whip. And we are told that the pronouns he, she, and it are no longer appropriate categories. And we're all somewhere along a spectrum typified by the statement, sometimes I feel feminine, and sometimes masculine, and sometimes both at the same time. There are no givens. The writer who won the Pulitzer Prize, Marilyn Robinson in Iowa City, University of Iowa, is a friend of mine, and she, not too long ago, wrote a book, The Givenness of Things. But there are no givens. And we can be anything we want. Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman coined the term liquid modernity, because liquids are ready to change shape at any moment. Hence the term like liquid times, liquid modernity, liquid love. Living in this topsy-turvy, crazy, and confusing world, it's easy to feel alone and even feel abandoned by God. In fact, that's how many of our teenagers and high school kids, college students, loneliness, everybody's looking to belong somewhere. But they are all so alienated. Someone describes modernity as everyone is everywhere, but no one is in charge. It's easy to feel God has forgotten us. And I have prayed many times in the last many years, started with my campus ministry. Sometimes I was ridiculed with my colleagues when we talk about having a Bible distribution. But they later became my friends, and one of them, in fact, said, well, we should distribute the portions from the Old Testament, the Judges, and all that, and the Jewish rabbi could be part of our Bible distribution. How long, oh Lord, must we wait? I'm sure some of us older people, we have seen it all, isn't it? And we must feel that way. I found comfort in the phrase from the hymn, "This is my Father's world." And it says that though the world, the wrong, seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. And we'll sing that later. Thank you for including that. And as a ruler, God is not only with us, He also makes things happen. Daniel 1 verse 2 says, "And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God." Daniel 1:9, "Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. I'm pretty sure that as a young man when I came, and being Asian at that time was an advantage. I frequently thought if I clean shaven my head and wear a bed sheet, I'd try a couple of hundred people. Now God has caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. At the end of the 10 days, verse 15 says that they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. And this is how God manages the world. Whether it's in the political arena or in evangelism or in cultivating our spiritual growth, it's God who gives wisdom and desire to learn. You know, the former head of the chair, actually, of the African American Studies, they later divided at University into two different departments. And he was chair of both, recently retired. At his old age, he's returning back to his childhood faith. He said, Jason, I grew up, in the South from Georgia, and our whole family went to church. But when I went to college, I don't know why, I just quit going to church. And when you talk to college students, that's how they can make a decision that I'm going to quit. But they just quit. That's part of that secular culture. That is reigning culture. But it's God who changes the attitude at any age and make them humble to receive his salvation. The biblical view of God's sovereignty says that we are not gods, but derived from God and dependent on God. And that's why we see Daniel, that God works in our subconscious mind through the dream. Nowadays, we don't hear much about, God revealing himself through the dreams. It's those who are dabbling in Eastern religions that talks about dreams and all that. But God did use dreams. He also uses the choices we make, and this is even more important. The circumstances we face day to day to accomplish his purpose. We see, on the other hand, that even though God is in control of all things, Daniel and his friends had to make the decision not to eat the king's food. And this is not to adopt the world's values and mindset, the courage to be distinctively Christian, to live differently. Maybe another way of saying that would be holiness. We talk so much about freedom today. We forget about holiness. God has glory because he's a holy God. He's true to himself. And when we learn from God to be holy, then we have integrity. We truly reflect who we are deep down as a person. And it's very difficult nowadays, to be different. In the 60s, of course, we belonged to the very conservative Christian Reformed Church, and they were criticizing the Christian Reformed Church, which was true. You kind of, try to separate yourself, and you have no, you're so heavenly minded that you don't have earthly use, worldly use. But now it's just the opposite. We're so worldly minded that we don't have any heavenly use or lack that. And it's very difficult, perhaps, because the social media mobs give their thumbs up and thumbs down like the Roman emperor. Verse 8 summarizes the uncompromising life with these simple words, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself. It's not smoking, not drinking, and all that. We Presbyterians do take a drink now and then, and the Anglicans do more even. But it's not that, but it's really the integrity, word holiness, righteousness. Second, human crisis is God's opportunity. As long as Nebuchadnezzar was not afraid and the magicians were held in high esteem, Daniel wasn't able to gain a hearing. But now the great day has arrived for Daniel to proclaim the name of the Lord to kings and wise men. Daniel replied to the king, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." Verses 27 and 28. I remember when President Jimmy Carter announced the normalization with China in the late 70s. A student from Taiwan who was living with us, and at that time we lived with students communally. There were students from Zimbabwe, Puerto Rico, Taiwan, Guatemala, Zimbabwe, even Grand Rapids, Michigan. And she and her mother, who was visiting her at that time, did not sleep all night. They cried because they were so afraid. They retreated. The nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek retreated to Taiwan, the small island. And then Jimmy Carter announced normalization. And I must have sounded cruel and cold and uncaring when I said, as Christians, we must always think in terms of the gospel. But sure enough, along with the normalization was the reopening of many churches. When I brought Bibles to China, they said, "Don't bring Bibles here. We print Bibles." In fact, they gave me a copy. But there, over 1 billion people, there's never enough Bible for all of them. In fact, when I first visited China in 1979, a man told me that he would, at that time, during the Cultural Revolution, all the libraries, all the universities were closed, were shut. He said, "I would crawl through the window to the library and read the Bible every night." But then the opening brought students to University of Iowa. Students from China is the highest, the largest group at the University of Iowa. And it changes the landscape of Iowa City. Some of you may remember the tragic shooting in 1991. The wife, the widow of the only non-Anglo or the only Chinese staff person, he just got his postdoctorate or got his doctorate, became a Christian shortly thereafter. And she moved to California, and now she and her husband and daughter are members of the church there. During my time in campus ministry, I must have baptized nearly 200, if not more, students, and most of them were from China, including the president of the Friendship Association of the Chinese Students and its Scholars at the time. And she was also baptized at the time, but her husband was not. But after the shooting, because the three brothers of Anne Cleary wrote a letter, they were devout Catholics. They wrote a letter and it was translated to Chinese and sent to the perpetrator's family, Liu Gang's family, and said, "As we're grieving for the death, the loss of our sister, we think of you, that perhaps you suffer even more." And the husband of Linda Gao became a Christian. Just 2 years ago, they came back for a visit and they said, "We want you to know that, they both are ministers now. In fact, they're the director of a center in California working mainline students." Just 2-3 weeks ago, a couple from Massachusetts called me and said, "You married us 30 years ago." And as I get older, I keep forgetting names, and I look at the book, I didn't even have a record, but they said, when you married us, we weren't Christians. But shortly after that, we became Christians, and we're now serving in the church. My wife is working with the youth group, and I am the board of the deacon board. The non-reformed Presbyterian churches don't have elders. You see, Nebuchadnezzar had everything a human being would want: money, power, and popularity. But he was upset by the dream of the growing realization that all is vanity. Outwardly, nothing has changed, but inwardly, insecurity and uncertainty, perhaps underneath the dreams or the ultimate questions raised every day by ordinary people like you and me. What is the purpose of life and existence? Why so much that's good and beautiful, marked with signs of instability, frailty, and decay? So the first thing we learn from the life of Daniel is no matter how dark the times, God will never abandon us. The second is every crisis is God's opportunity. For the darkest hour is truly just before the dawn. And this is also how we must look at the present cultural crisis. God is sovereign over history and the rise and fall of nations. This is true of Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, followed by Persia, Greece, Rome, but also every modern empire, superpower too, including the United States. The third principle is no matter how dark the times, we are called to be bearers of God's revelation wherever we are and whatever we do. I thank God for the privilege of getting to know many of the brilliant, accomplished professors at the University of Iowa, and some of them became my good friends, I would say. But they were in the dark about the most important things in life. A Bible commentator says that the simplest child of God can give a better account of what international relations are heading than the most respected statesman and familiar with God's word. As Christians, we do not know everything about the future because we see through a glass darkly. But we do know some things about the future, and these are more important. In fact, they're the most important things. What do Christians know about the future? One, death is not the end, but a doorway to eternal life or eternal death. We know that there's no utopian dream and no humanistic kingdom of peace and harmony on earth. And it certainly would not be brought about by either the Democratic or the Republican Party. Third, we know that the struggles between the nations of the world will eventually turn into a struggle between the kingdoms of this world, America included, and the kingdom of God. And this is the theme of the book of Daniel. No wonder Daniel remained calm and confident. When the astrologers answered the king that there is not a man on earth who can do what the king asks, Daniel replied, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in the days to come. For the secular mindset, what is unseen, what we don't see, is not real. But for the Christian, what is unseen is more real than the seen. Now, Easter mysticism, Easter religions believe that what is seen is not real. Hinduism, for example. It's Maya. It's not real. But Christianity says what is in is real as well, because it's a creation of God, including us. We're created by God. But what is unseen, including God, is more real than the seen. That's why we pray. That's why we trust God, who is not seen, because God is more real. And we are more real because we're created by God. The future will not be finally a matter of superpower agendas, as Guinness says, or scientific discoveries and technological advances, or even environmental disasters. But the final factor, as Guinness says, lies in God's good, strong hands. Maybe you feel like God has let you down. Prayer for good health, for a wayward son or daughter to return, for the healing of a loved one or a girlfriend who has been diagnosed with cancer or incurable diseases. But if God is God, then He's in control of all things. And He would use the choices we make and the circumstances we face to accomplish His purpose. The ultimate question is, who do you serve? Today, tomorrow, next year, and the year to come, and the rest of your life. Let me call your attention to one more thing before we close. Verse 21 of chapter 1 appears to be just an ordinary verse. In fact, you can count the verse with both hands. I think there are 11 words. It simply says, and Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. Now, who is King Cyrus? Cyrus is the name of the king of Persia that came after Babylon. In 536 BC, Babylon was defeated by Persia. When Cyrus became king, he allowed the Israelites to rebuild the temple and worship God freely. When Daniel was captured by Babylon, as we said earlier, he was only about 13 or 14. When he was 70, I wish it was 17, but 17, King Nebuchadnezzar and the nation of Babylon were no longer in existence. But Daniel was. Daniel was still there because God is a sovereign God. I believe that you and I are here this morning because God has put us here. Although we now live in a post-Christian America, it's not yet non-Christian. It's post-Christian, but not completely secular. But we don't know how much longer. Christians today must resolve to stand firm on their convictions like Daniel. But I believe that God has given us moments of grace. And now is our Daniel moment. Regardless of a year and a half ago, I had a ski accident, and there were several possibilities. I could have died. I could have become a paraplegic. But somehow, God decided that I could move my arms, but still numb. Ultimately, it's up to God, because our future is in His hands. And now is the Daniel moment. God can use youngsters. Wherever I go, when I see youngsters, I always feel a special kinship with them. God will use 13, 14, 15 who are younger. And God will use 70, 80, 90 if they could go skiing at 90 plus. I joined the group. Unfortunately, I fell. Never made it down the easiest run a year and 6 months ago. But God can use us as well. So let us be faithful regardless of what happens after this morning. Let us be faithful because God is faithful. Let us be faithful because God, through us and through His Holy Spirit, makes us faithful. And let's be faithful because we're most fulfilled, most happy, and most human that way. And to do otherwise will be to deny ourselves. Amen. Let us respond to God by making profession of faith. Let's all stand.